Good evening, guys. So, today we are reading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Chapter 8, The Wedding. 3 o'clock on the following afternoon found Harry, Ron, Fred, and George standing outside the great white marquee in the orchard awaiting the arrival of the wedding guests. Harry had taken a large dose of Polyjuice Potion and was now the double of a red-headed muggle boy from the local village, Ottery St. Catchpole, from whom Fred had stolen hairs using a summoning charm. The plan was to introduce Harry as a cousin Barney, and trust to the great number of Weasley relatives to camouflage him. All four of them were clutching seating plans so they could help show people to the right seats. A host of white-robed waiters had arrived an hour earlier, along with the Golden Jacket Band. All of these wizards were currently sitting a short distance away under a tree. Harry could see a blue haze of pipe smoke issuing from the spot. Behind Harry, the entrance of the marquee revealed rows and rows of fragile golden chairs set on each side of the long purple carpet. The supporting poles were intertwined with white and gold flowers. Fred and George had fastened an enormous bunch of golden balloons over the exact point where Bill and Fleur would shortly become husband and wife. Outside, butterflies and bees were hovering lazily over the grass and had to grow. Harry was rather uncomfortable. The muggle boy whose appearance he was affecting was slightly fatter than him, and his dress robes felt hot and tight in the full glare of the summer day. "When I get married," said Fred, tugging at the collar of his own robes, "I won't be bothered with any of this nonsense. You can wear what you like. And I'll put it in full body bind curse on Mum until it's all over." "She wasn't too bad this morning, considering," said George. "Cried a bit about Percy not being here, but who wants him? Oh, blimey, brace yourselves. Here they come. Look." Brightly colored figures were appearing one by one out of nowhere in the distant boundary of the yard. Within minutes of the procession had formed, which began to snake its way up through the garden through the marquee. Exotic flowers and bewitched birds fluttering on the witches' hats, while precious gems glittering from many of the wizards' cravats. A hum of excited chatter grew louder and louder, drowning the sound of bees as the crowd approached the tent. "Excellent! I think I see some Vila cousins," said George, craning his neck for a better look. "They need help understanding our English customs. I'll look after them." "Not so fast, your holiness," said Fred, darting past the gaggle of middle-aged witches heading the procession. He said, "Here, permits moi to Astaris," to a pair of pretty French girls who giggled and allowed him to escort them inside. George, who left to deal with the middle-aged witches, Ron took care of Mr. Weasley's old ministry colleague, Perkins, while a rather deaf old couple fell to Harry's lot. "Watcha," said a familiar voice as he came out of the marquee again and found Tonks and Lupin at the front of the queue. She had turned blonde for the occasion. "Arthur told us you were the one with the curly hair. Sorry about last night," she added in a whisper as Harry led them up the aisle. "The ministry being very anti-werewolf at the moment, and we thought our presence might not do you any favors." "It's fine. I understood," said Harry, speaking more to Lupin than Tonks. Lupin gave him a swift smile. But as they turned away, Harry saw Lupin's face fall again into lines of misery. He did not understand it, but there was no time to dwell on the matter. Hagrid was causing a certain amount of disruption. Having misunderstood Fred's instructions, he had sat himself not upon the magically enlarged and reinforced seat set aside for him in the back row, but on the 5 seats that now resembled a large pile of golden matchsticks. While Mr. Weasley repaired the damage and Hagrid shouted apologies to anyone who would listen, Harry hurried back to the entrance to find Ron face to face with the most eccentric looking wizard. Slightly cross-eyed, with shoulder-length white hair and with the texture of candy floss, he wore a cap whose tassel dangled in front of his nose, and the robes of eye-watering shade of egg yolk yellow. An odd symbol, rather like a triangle eye, glistened from a golden chain from around his neck. Xenophilius Lovegood, he said, extending a hand to Harry. My daughter and I live just over the hill. So kind of the Weasleys to invite us. But I think you know my Luna, he added to Ron. Yes, said Ron. Isn't she with you? She lingered in the charming little garden to say hello to the gnomes. Such glorious infestation! How few wizards realize how much we can learn from the wise little gnomes. Or, to give them their correct name, the Jernumblinganaminus. Okay. Jernumbligardency. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one, guys. Ours do know a lot of excellent swear words, says Ron, but I think Fred and George taught them those. He led the party of warlocks into the marquee as Luna rushed up. Hello, Harry, she said. My name's Barney, said Harry, flustered. Oh, you have changed that too, she asked brightly. How do you know? Oh, just your expression, she said. Like her father, Luna was wearing bright yellow robes, which had accessorized with a large sunflower on her hair. Once you get over the brightness of it all, the general effect was quite pleasant. At least there was no radishes dangling from her ears. Xenophilius, who was deep in conversation with an acquaintance, had missed the exchange between Luna and Harry. Bidding the wizard farewell, he turned to his daughter, who held up her finger and said, Daddy, look, one of the gnomes actually bit me. How wonderful! Gnome saliva is enormously beneficial, said Mr. Lovegood, seizing Luna's outstretched finger and examining the bleeding puncture marks. Luna, my love, if you should feel any burdening talent today, perhaps an unexpected urge to sing opera or to disclaim in Marmish, do not repress it. You may have been gifted by the Jernumblies. Ron passed them in the opposite direction, let out a loud snort. Ron can laugh, said Luna sternly as Harry led her and Xenophilius towards their seats. But my father has done a lot of research on the Jernumbly magic. Really, said Harry, who had long since decided not to challenge Luna and her father's peculiar views. Are you sure you don't want to put anything on that bite, though? Oh, it's fine, said Luna, sucking her finger in a dreamy fashion and looking Harry up and down. You look smart. I told Dad most people would probably wear dress robes, but he believes you ought to wear sun colors to a wedding. For luck, you know? As she drifted off after her father, Ron reappeared with an elderly witch clutching his arm. Her beaky nose, red-rimmed eyes, and feathery pink hat gave her a look of bad-tempered flamingo. And your hair's much too long, Ronald. For a moment I thought you were Genera. Merlin's beard. What is Phineas Lovegood wearing? He looks like an omelet. And who are you? She barked at Harry. Yeah, Auntie Muriel, this is Cousin Barney. Another Weasley. You guys breed like gnomes. Isn't Harry Potter here? I was hoping to meet him. I thought he was a friend of yours, Ronald. Or have you merely been boasting? No, he couldn't come. Main excuse, did he? Not as, gomeless as he looks in the press photographs, though I've just instructed the bride on how best to wear my tiara, she shouted at Harry. goblin maid, you know, and been in the family for centuries. She's a good-looking girl, but still French. Well, well, find me a good seat, Ronald. I am 107, and I ought not to be on my feet too long. Ron gave Harry a meaningful look as he passed and did not reappear for some time. When next they met the entrance, Harry had shown a dozen more people to their places. The marquee was nearly full now, and for the first time there was no queue outside. "Nightmare Mariel is," said Ron, mopping his forehead on his sleeve. "She used to come to the Christmas parties every year. Then, thank God, she took offense because Fred and George set off dung bombs under her chair at dinner. Dad always says she had written them out of her will. Like they care. They're going to end up richer than anyone in the family, rate they're going. Wow," he added, blinking rather rapidly at Hermione, who hurried towards them. "You look great." "Always a tone of surprise," said Hermione through her smile. She was wearing a floaty lilac-colored dress with matching high heels. Her hair was sleek and shiny. "Your great Aunt Muriel doesn't agree. I just met her upstairs while she was giving Fleur the tiara," she said. "Oh dear, is this the Muggle-born? And then bad posture and skinny ankles." "Don't take it personally. She's rude to everyone," said Ron. "Talking about Muriel?" inquired George, re-emerged from the marquee with Fred. "Yeah, she's just told me my ears are lopsided. Old bat. I wish Uncle Bilious was still with us, though he was a right laugh at weddings." "Wasn't he the one who saw a grim and died 24 hours later?" "Yeah, well, he was a bit odd towards the end," conceded George. "But before he went loopy, he was the life and soul of the party," said Fred. He used to down an entire bottle of fire whiskey, then run into the dance floor, hoist up his robes, and start pulling bunches of flowers out of his— "Yes, he sounds like a real charmer," said Hermione, while Harry roared with laughter. "Never married for some reason," said Ron. "You amaze me," said Hermione. They were all laughing so much that none of them noticed the latecomer, a dark-haired young man with a large curved nose, thick black eyebrows, until he held out his invitation to Ron and said, with his eyes on Hermione, "You look wonderful." "Victor!" she shrieked, and dropped her small beaded bag, which made a loud thump quite disproportionate to the size. As she scrambled, blushed to pick it up, she said, "I didn't know you were— Goodness, it's lovely to see you. How are you?" Ron's ears had turned bright red again. After glancing at Crumb's invitation, as if he did not believe a word of it, he said much too loudly, "How come you're here?" "Fleur invited me," said Crumb, eyebrows raised. Harry, who had no grudge against Crumb, shook hands. Then, feeling it would be prudent to remove Crumb from Ron's vicinity, offered to show him his seat. "Your friend is not pleased to see me," said Crumb as they entered the now packed marquee. "Or is he a relative?" he added in a glance at Harry's red curly hair. "Cousin," Harry muttered. But Crumb was not really listening. His appearance was causing a stir, particularly amongst the Vila cousins. He was, after all, a famous Quidditch player. While people were still craning their necks to get a good look at him, Ron, Hermione, Fred, and George came hurrying down the aisle. "Time to sit down," Fred told Harry, "or we're going to get run over by the bride." Harry, Ron, Hermione took their seats in the second row behind Fred and George. Hermione looked rather pink, and Ron's ears were still scarlet. After a few moments, he muttered to Harry, "Did you see he's grown a stupid beard?" Harry gave a non-committal grunt. A sense of jittery anticipation had filled the warm tent, and general murmuring, broken by an occasional spurt of excited laughter. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley strolled up the aisle, smiling and waving at relatives. Mrs. Weasley was wearing a brand new set of amethyst-colored robes with a matching hat. A moment later, Bill and Charlie stood up in the front of the marquee, both wearing dress robes with large white robes in their buttonholes. Fred, Wolf whistled, and there was an outbreak of giggles from the Vila cousins. The, then the crowd fell silent as the music swelled from what seemed to be the golden balloons. "Oh," said Hermione, swiveling around in her seat to look at the entrance. A great collective sigh issued from an assembled witches and wizards as Monsieur Delacour and Fleur came walking up the aisle. Fleur gliding, Monsieur Delacour bouncing and beaming. Fleur was wearing a very simple white dress and seemed to be emitting a strong silvery glow. While her radiance usually dimmed everyone else's by comparison, today it beautified everyone it fell upon. Ginny and Gabrielle, both wearing golden dresses, looked even prettier than usual, and Fleur had reached him. Bill did not look as though he had ever met Fenrir Greyback. "Ladies and gentlemen," said a slightly sing-song voice, and with a slight shock, Harry saw the same small, tufty-haired wizard who had preceded the Dumbledore's funeral, now standing in front of Bill and Fleur. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two faithful souls." "Yes, my tiara sets off the whole thing nicely," said Aunt Muriel in a rather carrying whisper. "But I must say, Ginevra's dress is cut far too low." Ginny glanced around, grinning, winked at Harry, then quickly faced the front again. Harry's mind wandered a long way from the Marquis, back to the afternoon spent alone with Ginny in lonely parts of the school grounds. They seemed so long ago. They had seemed too good to be true, as though he had been stealing shining hours from a normal person's life, a person without the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. "Do you, William Arthur, take Fleur Isabel?" In the front row, Mrs. Weasley and Madame Delacour were both sobbing quietly into the scraps of lace. Trumpet-like sounds from the back of the Marquis told everyone that Hagrid had taken out his own tablecloth-sized handkerchief. Hermione turned and beamed at Harry. Her eyes, too, were full of tears. "Then I declare you bonded for life." The tufty-haired wizard waved his wand high over his head of Bill and Fleur. The shower of silver stars fell upon them, spiraling around their now intertwined figures as Fred and George led a round of applause. The golden balloons overhead burst. Birds of paradise and tiny golden bells flew and floated out of them, adding to the songs and chimes to the din. "Ladies and gentlemen," called the tufty-haired wizard, "if you would please stand up." As they did so, Aunt Muriel grumbling audibly, he waved his wand again. The seats which had been sitting rose gracefully into the air as the canvas walls of the Marquis vanished, so that they stood beneath the canopy supported by golden poles, with a glorious view of the sunlit orchard and surrounding countryside. Next, a pool of molten gold spread over the center of the tent to form a gleaming dance floor, and hovering chairs grouped themselves around small white tablecloths which all floated gracefully back to earth around it, and the golden jacket band trooped towards the podium. "Smooth," said Ron approvingly as the waiters popped up on all sides, some bearing silver trays of pumpkin juice, butter beer, and fire whiskey, others tottering trays of tarts and sandwiches. "So, we should go and congratulate them," said Hermione, standing on tiptoe to see the place where Bill and Fleur had vanished amid the crowd of well-wishers. "We'll have time later," shrugged Ron, snatching 3 butterbeers from the passing tray and handing one to Harry. "Hermione, cup hold. Let's grab a table." "Not there. Nowhere near Muriel." Ron led away across the empty dance floor, glancing left and right as he went. Harry felt sure that he was keeping an eye out for a crumb. By the time they had reached the other side of the Marquis, most of the tables were occupied. The emptiest was the one where Luna sat alone. "All right if we join you?" asked Ron. Oh, yes, she said happily. Daddy's just gone to give Bill and Flora our present. What is it? A lifetime supply of goody roots? Asked Ron. Hermione aimed a kick at him under the table, but caught Harry instead. Eyes watering in pain, Harry lost track of the conversation for a few moments. The band had begun to play. Bill and Fleur took to the dance floor first. To great applause, after a while, Mr. Weasley led Madame Delacour onto the dance floor, followed by Mr. Weasley and Fleur's father. "I like this song," said Luna, swaying in time to the waltz-like tune, and a few seconds later she stood up and glided onto the dance floor, where she revolved on the spot quite alone, eyes closed, waving her arms. "She's great, isn't she?" said Ron admiringly. "Always good value." But the smile vanished from his face at once. Victor Crumb had dropped into Luna's vacant seat. Hermione looked pleasurably flustered. By the time Crumb had not come to, but this time Crumb had not come to compliment her. With a scowl on his face, he said, "Who's that man in the yellow?" "That's Xenophilius Lovegood. He's the father of a friend of ours," said Ron. His tone indicated that they were not about to laugh at Xenophilius, despite the clear provocation. "Come and dance," he said abruptly to Hermione. She looked rather taken aback, but pleased too, and got up. They vanished together into the growing throng of the dance floor. "Ah, are they together now?" asked Crumb, momentarily distracted. Sort of," said Harry. "Who are you?" Crumb asked. "Barney Weasley." They shook hands. "You, Barney, you know this man Lovegood well?" "No, I only met him today. Why?" Crumb glowered over the top of his drink, watching Xenophilius, who was chattering to several warlocks on the other side of the dance floor. "Because," said Crumb, if he's not a guest of Fleur's, I'll duel him right here and now, for wearing that filthy sign upon his chest." "Sign?" said Harry, looking at Xenophilius too, the strange triangular eye with gleaming on his chest. "Why? What's wrong with it?" "Grindelwald. That's Grindelwald's sign." "Grindelwald? The dark wizard Dumbledore defeated?" "Exactly." Crumb's jaw muscles worked as if they were chewing. Then he said, "Grindelwald killed my people, my grandfather, for instance. Of course he was never powerful in this country. They said he feared Dumbledore, and rightly, seeing how he was finished. But this," he pointed a finger at Xenophilius, "this is his symbol. I recognized it at once. Grindelwald carved it into the walls of Durmstrang when he was a pupil there. Some idiots copied it onto their books and clothes, thinking to make themselves impressive. You know, those of us who have lost family members to Grindelwald taught them better." Crumb cracked his knuckles menacingly and glowered at Xenophilius. Harry felt perplexed. It seemed incredibly unlikely that Luna's father was a supporter of the dark arts, and nobody else in the tent seemed to recognize the triangular rune-like shape. "Are you quite sure it's Grindelwald's?" "I am not mistaken," said Crumb coldly. "I've walked past that sign for several years. I know it well." "Well, there's a chance," said Harry, "that Xenophilius doesn't actually know what the symbol means. The Lovegoods are quite unusual. He could easily have picked it up somewhere and think it is a cross-section of a head of a crumple-horned Snorkack or something." "A cross-section of a what?" "Well, I don't know what they are, but apparently him and his daughter go on holiday looking for them." Harry felt he was doing a very bad job explaining Luna and her father. "That's her," he said, pointing to Luna, who was still dancing alone, waving her arms around her head like someone attempting to beat off midges. "Was she doing that?" "Probably trying to get rid of Ruxpert," said Harry, who recognized the symptoms. Crumb did not seem to know whether Harry was making fun of him. He drew his wand from inside his robes, tapped it menacingly on his thigh, flew sparks out the end. Gregorovitch! Gregorovitch! He said loudly, and Crumb started. Sorry. And Crumb started. But Harry was too excited to care. The memory had come back to him at the sight of Crumb's wand, Ollivander taking it and examining it carefully before the Triwizard Tournament. "What about him?" said Crumb suspiciously. "He's a wand maker." "I know that," said Crumb. "He made your wand. That's why I thought Quidditch." Crumb was looking more and more suspicious. "How do you know Gregorovitch made my wand?" I read it somewhere, I think," said Harry. "In a fan magazine?" he improvised wildly, as Crumb looked mollified. "I had not realized I ever discussed my wand with fans," he said. "So, where is Gregorovitch these days?" Crumb looked puzzled. "He retired several years ago. I was one of the last to purchase a Gregorovitch wand. They are best. Although I know, of course, you Brits set much store to Ollivander." Harry did not answer. He pretended to watch the dancers like Crumb, but he was thinking hard. So Voldemort was looking for a celebrated wand maker, and Harry did not have to search far for a reason. Surely it was because Harry's wand had done on the night before when Voldemort had pursued him across the skies. The Holly and Phoenix feather wand had conquered the borrowed wand, something that Ollivander had not anticipated or understood. Would Gregorovitch know better? Was he truly more skilled than Ollivander? Did he know secrets of wands that Ollivander did not? "This girl is very nice looking," Crumb said, recalling Harry to his surroundings. Crumb was pointing at Ginny, who had just joined Luna. "She is also a relative of yours?" "Yeah," said Harry, suddenly irritated. "And she's seeing someone. Jealous type, big bloke. You wouldn't want to cross him." Crumb grunted. "What," he said, drained his goblet and getting to his feet again, "is the point of being an international Quidditch player if all the good-looking girls are taken?" He strode off, leaving Harry to take a sandwich from the passing waiter and make his way around the edge of the crowded dance floor. He wanted to find Ron, to tell him about Gregorovitch, but Ron was dancing with Hermione out in the middle of the floor. Harry leaned up against one of the golden pillars and watched Ginny, who was now dancing with Fred and George's friend Lee Jordan, trying not to feel resentful about the promise he had given Ron.